March 8, 1957, 11:47 p.m. Small's Paradise, 135th Street and 7th Avenue, Harlem. The smell hit first. Not smoke exactly, but something chemical, accelerant, gasoline mixed with something else. It came through the ventilation system in the private office on the second floor, where Bumpy Johnson sat across from 3 union representatives, negotiating terms for a construction contract that would employ 200 Harlem residents. Julius Gordon, standing by the door, noticed it first. "You smell that?" Julius asked. Bumpy looked up from the contract papers spread across his desk. He breathed in slowly through his nose, processing. "Fire," Bumpy said calmly. "Downstairs, recently started." One of the union representatives, a man named Patterson, stood up quickly. "We need to get out." "Sit down," Bumpy said. It wasn't a request. Patterson sat. Bumpy turned to Julius. "Go check. Come back and tell me what we're dealing with." Julius left. The 3 union representatives exchanged glances, trying to understand why Bumpy Johnson was sitting calmly at his desk while his building was potentially burning down around him. 30 seconds later, Julius came back. His face was grim. "Kitchen's on fire, spreading fast. Someone poured accelerant along the back wall and lit it. Professional job. Fire department's been called, but they're 10 minutes out minimum." "How bad?" "Bad enough that everyone downstairs evacuated. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this floor is compromised." Bumpy nodded slowly, then looked at the 3 union representatives. "Gentlemen, we were discussing the pay scale for the electrical work. You were offering $4.50 an hour. I was asking for $6. I believe we can settle at $5.25. Do you agree?" Patterson stared at him. "Mr. Johnson, the building is on fire." "I'm aware. Do you agree to $5.25? The smell of smoke was getting stronger now. You could hear it too, the crackling from below, the sound of wood beginning to surrender to heat. "Yes," Patterson said quickly. "Yes, we agree. Can we leave now?" "Almost," Bumpy said. "Julius, get the contracts. I want signatures before we go." "Bumpy," Julius said carefully, "we don't have time for—" "We have exactly enough time. Get the contracts." Julius retrieved 3 copies of the contract from the file cabinet. Bumpy amended the hourly rate on each copy, initialed the changes, then slid them across the desk to the 3 union representatives. "Sign," Bumpy said. They signed, hands shaking slightly, but they signed. Bumpy collected the contracts, placed them in a leather portfolio, then stood up. "Now we can leave." By the time Bumpy, Julius, and the 3 union representatives made it down the back staircase and out to the street, Small's Paradise was burning hard. The kitchen was fully engulfed. Flames were climbing the interior walls. The crowd that had evacuated was standing across the street, watching, and in that crowd, Bumpy noticed something. 3 men who didn't belong. They weren't regulars. They weren't neighborhood. They were watching the fire with a specific kind of satisfaction, the kind that comes from seeing your plan work exactly as intended. Bumpy walked straight toward them. Julius moved to follow, but Bumpy raised one hand slightly, a signal. "Stay back." The 3 men saw Bumpy coming. Their satisfaction turned to confusion, then to concern when they realized he wasn't running from the fire. He was walking toward them, with the same calm expression he'd had sitting at his desk while the building burned. Bumpy stopped 3 feet away from the tallest of the 3 men, a kid maybe 25 years old, with a leather jacket and a face that was trying very hard to look tough. "You work for Polycarbone," Bumpy said. Not a question. The kid didn't answer, but his eyes gave it away. "You sent you to burn my club. Wanted to send a message, make it clear he's not afraid of me. Show Harlem that Bumpy Johnson can be pushed." The kid found his voice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," Bumpy said quietly. "And that's fine. I'm not here to argue about it. I'm here to tell you something. And I need you to remember every word so you can repeat it to Polly exactly as I say it." Behind them, Small's paradise groaned as part of the roof collapsed inward. Flames shot higher into the night sky. Firefighters were arriving, sirens wailing, firefighters shouting orders. Bumpy didn't turn to look. His eyes stayed locked on the kid. "You burned my club," Bumpy said. "You did it well, professional job, good accelerant placement, timed perfectly for when you knew I'd be inside. That takes planning, that takes courage, that takes someone who's willing to risk starting a war." He paused. "Here's what you didn't account for. I didn't run. I didn't panic. I didn't evacuate until I was finished with my business. I sat in that building while it burned, and I finished a contract negotiation because the fire didn't matter as much as the work I was doing." The kid was staring at him now, not with defiance, but with something else, recognition that he'd miscalculated badly. "You go back to Polly, and you tell him that I got the message. He wanted to show me I could hurt me, could take something I valued, could make me feel unsafe in my own place, and he did. Small's paradise is gone, I understand that." Bumpy took one step closer. "But you also tell him this. While his fire was burning, while his plan was working, I was still conducting business. I didn't run. I didn't stop. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. And that's the part he needs to think about. Because if I don't stop when my building is literally on fire around me, what does he think it's going to take to make me stop coming after him?" The second man in the group, older, maybe 35, spoke up. "You threatening us?" "No," Bumpy said. "Threats are what people use when they're not sure of themselves. I'm sure. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Paulie started something tonight. He thought burning my club would break me, would make me negotiate, would make me back down from whatever territory dispute we're having." He gestured to the burning building behind him. "Does it look like I'm backing down? Does it look like I'm broken? I walked out of that building after I finished my meeting. I didn't run. I finished. And now I'm standing here, talking to the men who started the fire, and I'm completely calm. What does that tell you about how this situation is going to end?" The third man, who hadn't spoken yet, took a step back. "You tell Paulie," Bumpy said, his voice dropping even lower, "that he can burn every building I own. He can destroy every piece of property I have, and I will rebuild. Or I won't, but either way, I won't stop doing what I do. Because what I do isn't about buildings, it's about something he doesn't understand." "What's that?" the kid asked, his voice barely audible. "Principle," Bumpy said. "I operate on principle, and the principle here is simple. You don't get to dictate terms to me through fear. You don't get to change my behavior by destroying my property. The only thing you get to do is find out what happens when you try." Behind them, a section of Small's paradise collapsed completely. The crowd gasped. Firefighters surged forward with hoses. Bumpy still didn't turn around. "How much did Paulie pay you to do this?" Bumpy asked. The kid hesitated, then said, 5,000 each. "I'll give you 10,000 each, right now, in cash. You take that money, you leave New York tonight, and you never work for Paulie Carbone again." The three men looked at each other. "Why?" the older one asked. "Because you're just soldiers following orders. You're not the problem. Paulie is, and I'd rather spend $30,000 making sure you're gone than waste time dealing with you while I'm dealing with him." "And if we say no?" the kid asked.
Bumpy smiled, not warmly. "Then you stay in New York, you keep working for Paulie, and you find out what happens to people who burn my buildings. But I don't think you're going to say no, because you just watched me walk out of a burning building after finishing a business meeting, and you're realizing that maybe Paulie made a mistake when he picked this fight. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. He'd prepared it before walking over somehow, like he'd known this conversation would happen. 30,000, 10 for each of you. Take it, leave, live. The kid looked at the envelope, looked at his two companions, looked back at Bumpy. If we take this money and leave, what happens to Paulie? That's between me and him, Bumpy said. You don't need to worry about it. You just need to decide if you're smart enough to walk away. The kid took the envelope. All three of them did. They were gone by sunrise. March 9th, 1957, 2:30 a.m. Bumpy stood across the street from the smoking remains of Small's Paradise, watching firefighters pour water on the few remaining hot spots. Julius stood next to him. $30,000, Julius said quietly. That's a lot of money to pay the people who burned your club. It's cheaper than a war, and smarter. Those three kids, they were just doing a job. No loyalty to Paulie beyond the paycheck. Take away the paycheck, give them a bigger one, and they're gone. No revenge, no retaliation, just math. And Paulie? Bumpy was quiet for a moment. Paulie made a mistake tonight. He thought burning my club would make me weak, would make me vulnerable, would give him leverage. It didn't? No, because I didn't react the way he expected. I didn't panic. I didn't evacuate. I didn't show fear. And now everyone who was here tonight, everyone who watched me walk out of that building after finishing my meeting, they're going to tell that story. And that story is going to reach Paulie. And when it does, he's going to realize something. What? That you can't intimidate someone who doesn't value things more than principles. He burned a building. I can rebuild a building. But he can't rebuild the reputation he just lost when word spreads that he tried to burn me out and I didn't even blink. Julius nodded slowly. What are you going to do about him? Nothing, Bumpy said. Julius looked surprised. Nothing? I'm going to let him sit with what happened tonight. Let him think about the fact that his best move, his most aggressive move, didn't work. And then I'm going to watch what he does next. Because men like Paulie, when their intimidation fails, they make mistakes. They escalate. They get desperate. And desperate men are easy to predict. And if he comes after you again? Bumpy finally turned away from the ruins of his club.
Then I'll do what I did tonight. I'll finish what I'm doing, walk out when I'm ready, and make sure everyone sees that nothing he does changes my behavior. Because that's the only power that matters, Julius. Not the power to hurt people. The power to be unhurt by what they do to you. March 12th, 1957. 3 days after the fire. Paulie Carbone sat in his social club in the Bronx, waiting for his 3 guys to report back. They didn't show up. By March 13th, Paulie was making calls, trying to figure out where they'd gone. By March 14th, word reached him. Bumpy Johnson had paid them to leave, $30,000. They'd taken the money and disappeared. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the story that was spreading through every bar, every club, every corner in New York. The story about Bumpy Johnson sitting in his office while the building burned, finishing a contract negotiation, refusing to evacuate until the work was done. People weren't talking about the fire. They were talking about Bumpy's response to the fire. And the response was making Paulie look weak. March 15th, Paulie called for a meeting with Bumpy. Neutral territory, no weapons, just talk. They met at a diner in Queens at 3 p.m. Paulie tried to act confident, but Bumpy could see the calculation in his eyes, the reassessment. You paid my guys to leave, Paulie said. I did, Bumpy confirmed. That's disrespectful. Those were my men. They were your employees. I offered them a better deal. They took it. That's business. Paulie's jaw tightened. You should have run out of that building. Anyone with sense would have run. I had work to finish, Bumpy said simply.
The fire was your problem, not mine. My problem? You started it. You had to make sure it worked. You had to worry about whether I'd get out, whether your guys would get caught, whether the whole thing would backfire. That's a lot of stress, Paulie. A lot of things that could go wrong. Bumpy sipped his coffee. Me? I just had to finish a meeting. That's easy. That's calm. That's controlled. So yeah, the fire was your problem. I just sat through it. Paulie stared at him for a long moment. What do you want? Paulie finally asked. I want you to stop trying to intimidate me. I want you to accept that whatever territory dispute we have, it's not going to be settled by burning buildings or threatening people. It's going to be settled by who can operate more effectively, more sustainably, with more community support. And if you don't accept that, then you keep trying things like burning my club, and I keep sitting through them, and eventually you run out of moves while I'm still conducting business. And everyone watching this situation learns the same lesson. You can't beat someone who refuses to be beaten. Paulie was quiet for 30 seconds.
Then he said, "You can have 125th Street. I'll pull my operations north of 135th. We don't cross territories." "Agreed," Bumpy said. They shook hands. The war that never happened ended in a diner in Queens because Bumpy Johnson had refused to run from a burning building. Small's Paradise was rebuilt over the next 8 months. Bumpy hired local contractors, employed Harlem residents, and reopened in November 1957. The new club had better ventilation, a sprinkler system, and fire exits on every floor. But more importantly, it had a story. The story of the night Bumpy Johnson sat in his office while the building burned around him and finished negotiating a union contract because the work mattered more than the fire. That story spread beyond New York, beyond the underworld. It became part of Bumpy's legend, the proof that his power wasn't about violence or intimidation or fear. It was about something deeper, unshakable principle. Years later, a journalist asked Bumpy about that night. "Why didn't you evacuate when the fire started?" Bumpy thought for a moment. Because running would have given Paulie Carbone exactly what he wanted. He wanted to see me afraid. He wanted to disrupt my business. He wanted to prove he could control my behavior by destroying my property. "But you could have died." "Maybe," Bumpy said, "but more likely, I would have evacuated, the building would have burned, and Paulie would have learned that burning buildings works, that fear works, that intimidation changes behavior. And once you teach someone that lesson, they keep using it, on you, on others, on everyone." "So you stayed to prove a point?" "I stayed because the work I was doing mattered. 3 union representatives were in my office negotiating a contract that would employ 200 people from my community. That contract was more important than the fire, so I finished it. And yes, that sent a message, but the message wasn't about defiance, it was about priority." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you let threats dictate your priorities, you've already lost. The fire was a threat. The contract was important work. I chose to prioritize the work. And when you make that choice, when you show that external threats don't change your internal focus, you take away the power of intimidation." Did Paulie Carbone understand that? Bumpy smiled. Eventually, after he tried a few more things and realized none of them worked, after he sat down and asked what I wanted, after we negotiated like adults instead of fighting like children. "Do you think the fire was worth it?" "The fire destroyed a building. Buildings can be rebuilt, but the lesson that came from that fire, the understanding that I couldn't be intimidated, that was worth more than any club. Because after that night, nobody tried to burn me out again. They knew it wouldn't work. They knew I'd sit through the fire and finish my business and walk out when I was ready." He paused.
Fear only works on people who value survival over principle. I've always valued principle over survival. And once people understand that about you, once they realize you're willing to sit in a burning building rather than let them control your behavior, they stop trying to control you. They start trying to negotiate with you. And negotiation is always better than intimidation. The story of March 8, 1957, became one of the most retold stories in Bumpy Johnson's legend. Not because of violence, not because of revenge, because of what didn't happen. Bumpy didn't run, didn't panic, didn't let a fire change his priorities. He sat in his office, finished his work, and walked out when he was ready. And that simple act of refusal, that choice to prioritize principle over self-preservation, sent a message more powerful than any retaliation could have. You can't control someone who won't be controlled. You can't intimidate someone who doesn't fear consequences. You can't win against someone who values the work more than the building. Paulie Carbone learned that lesson in March 1957. He never forgot it, and neither did anyone else who heard the story of the man who sat calmly in a burning building and finished his meeting because the contract mattered more than the fire. That's not stubbornness. That's not recklessness. That's power, the kind that can't be burned down.